It just worries me that as a culture, we are really making the wrong statement about murder.
A new temporary display in Pigeon Forge highlighting the 30th anniversary of serial killer Ted Bundy has a Knoxville family discouraged. The Frye family lost their father in a homicide in 1990. They say murderers should not be glorified. But according to experts at UT, murders and murderers are being framed as entertainment. Tonight, 10 News anchor Brandon Bates spoke to a sociologist who tells us why people are just so fascinated with death. And the Knoxville family says it needs to stop. Brandon.
Well, Robin, Dan and Lisa Frye lost their dad in 1990 when someone walked into his grocery store and shot him. Now the Frye family can't believe the amount of attention that killers receive.
Murder mysteries, true crime shows, or documentaries about serial killers.
I find them fascinating to see how people can do behaviors that are just so bizarre.
Many people are drawn to these types of shows, but for siblings Dan and Lisa Frye, this type of entertainment hits close to home.
29 years ago, my father was murdered.
29 years later, I still hear that scream.
Their dad was killed in his grocery store 29 years ago tomorrow, and a new Ted Bundy exhibit in Pigeon Forge took them by surprise.
I was pretty taken aback by the idea that we are now celebrating serial killers with their own exhibits.
So why are people drawn to horrific crimes or criminals?
I don't think it should be used for entertainment.
Experts say that from a psychological standpoint, people watch murder mysteries for the same reason people look at car accidents when they pass by, because sometimes it's just too hard to turn away.
I mean, we see this all the time.
Sociologist Tricia Bruce says there is some value in learning more about certain situations.
But I think there's a real problem here, too. I mean, if we create mass murder or violence as a commodity or as entertainment, then that can be disrespectful to those who actually experience that pain.
And while the pain is still present in the Frye family, they just hope the spotlight on murderers would dim and the victims would become the focus.
And the Frye family says that they understand the value of researching and learning from historical events like mass killings, but celebrating them just isn't right. Robin?
Brandon, thank you. A man is